your local video store card.
A comic book in your back pocket.
Games with no tutorials.
Music you had to discover.
And drinking water straight from the hose.
These are the things us millennials remember fondly. We are the Jennings brothers.
Join us after the streetlights come on
as we race our bikes from the top of the hill
right down memory lane.
Exchange those quarters because this podcast takes tokens.
Well, welcome back to This Podcast Takes Tokens, and today we are putting the tokens in the jukebox and taking it back to the 80s, where we're going to talk about our top five, not our top five, but the top five songs that remind us of the 80s. I want to clarify that this specific list is not our personal top five favorite 80s songs. These are the five songs that most remind us of the 80s when we hear them. So for clarification, it's not our personal top five. That list will come later. This is the top five songs that remind us of the 80s whenever we hear them. And before we get to number one, we're going to round out with a couple honorable mentions because it would not be a top five list unless you included more than five. So with that being said, let's just jump right into it.
Okay.
What you got to say?
I was just going to congratulate you on that introduction there. We're putting the tokens in the jukebox today. Yeah. I like that a lot, and kudos, sir. That was a phenomenal job there. So
thank you.
Yeah. So we're going to do top five. We're starting out with five. Am I starting or are you starting?
Yeah, number five. Well, in no particular order. Just like whatever you have number five on your list.
I see.
And we'll work our way down.
Okay. Well, so I have Motley Crue's Kickstart My Heart, 1989. You know this song. Who doesn't know this song, right?
Dr. Feelgood.
Yes. So the reason this makes me think of the 80s, like it is, I feel like it's the culmination of all the 80s hair metal. Because like you're listening to this song and they're really talking about like their career through this whole thing. And about like how they've been successful and, you know, and all this stuff. Like some of the lyrics, when I get high on speed. Now I know he's in that instance, he's more talking about like the motorcycle that he's going to be driving. But I'm sure he's also talking about drugs there too. So,
it is the 80s.
You know, they were big partiers, yeah. And then skydive naked from an airplane, and I think we did all this to rock. Like just those lines, they're looking back on their career they've had, and I think it's really a retrospective of just how wild and just how much excess and everything there was in this 80s hair metal scene, because right around the corner from that, you know, that's 1989 out of Seattle right now. There's going to be some sounds of grunge coming, and this hair metal is going to be dying. Yeah. This hair metal is going to be dying off soon. So I feel like, I have this at 5 just because there's a lot of other hair metal songs that I think are, probably more hair metal than this, because this song's really not that hair metal. I don't think the sound when I first heard it, I didn't realize it was Motley Crue. I thought it was like a different type of metal band, you know,
Def Leppard or Twisted Sister or something.
Yeah. And so, but I think that this really defines that whole movement of music. So that's why I've got that at my number 5.
All right. You know, it's funny is that was on my honorable mentions.
Oh,
list.
Okay.
Was, Motley Crue. But I had Dr. Feelgood.
Yeah.
Because that was probably my favorite song of theirs, and that whole album. I mean, that was one of those first albums that I discovered that you could just listen to all the way through for sure. And but yeah, that one missed the cut for me. It was on my honorable mentions. Yep. However, what did make the cut at my number 5 is in the same vein. Van Halen, Panama.
Oh, yes. Yes. Oh, that song's so good.
Opening drum beat.
Yes.
It always makes me think of just like, I'm sure that's what it was. It's supposed to be the revving engine of a motorcycle, and just like it just drives the entire song all the way through.
Yes.
And that song just like is very like 80s to me, and just like totally encapsulates that entire like 80s. I hesitate to say hair metal, but they definitely walk the line between heavy metal and hair metal.
Yes.
As far as like what their sound was and their look, because David Lee Roth, but for sure, Panama. That's my number 5. And it's that driving drum beat for me.
Every time if I'm driving down the road and Panama comes on, I mean that stereo is cranked up to like 1,000.
Yes.
And oh my gosh, that song. Good choice. That song is so good. It is so good.
So, all right, then what's your number 4?
Number
Who you got at number 4?
Okay. This may be a little controversial. All right. 1982, Michael Jackson, Beat It. And the reason I say it's controversial is because that Thriller album, there are so many good songs on that album. But I feel like this song was the first song to really merge genres, because you're talking about Van Halen. That guitar riff in Beat It is Eddie Van Halen playing that.
Oh, and that's right. That's right.
It is, yes. And I feel like this song brought in, different people that may not necessarily listen to pop music,
pop music,
or And like I said, I know that like Billie Jean was the big hit from that album.
That's the one that he came onto the scene with.
Yeah. But I don't know. I hear Beat It, and it just, to me, it just screams 80s, because you've got the metal in there. You've got the king of pop, the undisputed king of pop.
But not the king yet.
No, he wasn't yet.
He's still earning his stripes.
He was growing. He was growing into the king. He
was Michael Jackson from Jackson 5.
Yes, he was. Soon to be king of pop. He's reaching for that crown, and he's dancing every step to it. And oh my gosh. And now I think about that, just everything about that song is so good. And it's just in the riff, like it's just so 80s. I love it so much. That's why I got it at number 4.
All right. That's funny, because my number 4 is Thriller.
Oh my gosh.
Here's why.
Look at us.
Here's why. Number 4, Thriller, because everybody had that red leather jacket from the album. So that right there. And then the music video, that was a culmination of effort, unlike anything you've seen before. Like 14 minutes long or something.
I know.
An event, to be sure. I think they held a premiere for it.
They did.
Crazy.
Yeah, and it was scary, dude.
Yes.
When I was oh my gosh.
What was it? It was Landis that directed it, right? The guy that went on to do like Home Alone?
Really?
I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know.
I think so. It was one of those big like 80s directors back then. But yeah, so you got the jacket that everybody had. You got the until the sequin glove, really. Was the sequin glove, was that before or after the jacket?
That was before.
I can't remember.
I don't remember. I think it was after.
I don't remember. I think it was after.
Yeah.
I think it was after, because I think that was part of the Bad album.
Yep.
Yeah. Was the sequin glove. Or maybe that was Dangerous. One of the two. I can't remember. Anyways, Thriller, just because of how steeped, or how much it just burrowed into our culture in fashion. Not only the music, but the fashion. You had the movie, pop culture, just got taken over by Thriller, and that solidified Michael Jackson as the future king of pop. For sure. I think Bad crowned him, but Thriller put him on that trajectory.
Yeah.
And definitely laid out the path, or, called the shot, or whatever you want to say. Yeah. But it was, for me, it was Thriller.
Yeah.
And what's funny is so earlier in the week, I just went on YouTube and I pulled up like an 80s playlist, just like a top 80s playlist or something like that to start kind of like getting it fresh on my brain. And I'm sitting there when my wife's next to me and she's watching this, and we're having this kind of conversation back and forth. And she's like, oh, well, what about this one? And I said, oh yeah, but what about this one? And we're just going back and forth. And she's like, and then you got, like Michael Jackson's, you've got Michael Jackson's Billie Jean. That was really popular when I was a kid, but you've also got Thriller. And she's like, oh yeah. And I'm like, and you've also got Beat It, and you've got Bad, and you've got so much Michael Jackson. Just Michael Jackson by himself could have been the top 10 easily. There was so much that came out of the 80s from him. That was definitely his decade.
He is so good. Like, I don't care if you're not like into that kind of music. Like, I'm not huge into pop music. There's some pop music I like. There's a couple modern things I like. I've told you I like Adele, but like Michael Jackson, man, how can you not like Michael Jackson and all his stuff? It's just so ingrained in culture. And that Thriller song, man, you're right. It's and then he had Vincent Price that was on there doing the voice work for that. Golly. I remember watching that video. I think it was on like VH1 or MTV. It was on a Halloween night. Yeah. I was at my mom's house. Yeah. I was at my mom's house down the street from where I'm at now. And I remember watching that, and I was afraid to go to bed because I think it's like 7 or 8 blocks from here, there's a cemetery. And so I'm like just envisioning all these just zombies coming out, and I'm like, and they're going to be coming down the street, and they're going to be going past this house, and they're going to be going past this house because they're looking for me. They're looking for me. It didn't make any sense, but they were looking for me. They didn't care about anybody else. And my bed was right by the window, and I did not want to sleep by that window. Yep.
They're not going to go through the front door. They're going to walk around the house, through the gate, and go through the window.
And name me another music video that would do that to an 8-year-old kid.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't. So good.
Yes.
Shoot.
All right. I think we gotta go to number 3 now.
Number 3.
Clear the palette. Okay. What you got at number 3?
1985. Tears for Fears. Everybody Wants to Rule the World. That synth. Right? Yes. Oh my gosh. Listen, I know that we are like, I know we've done a couple other episodes, but like
80 cents.
I'm super passionate about all this right now. not that I'm not about the other stuff we've done, but man, this stuff is really hitting home. I don't know. Just this song is, there's a lot of good Tears for Fears songs, unquestionably, but this song is the one that I think of if I think of Tears for Fears. If I think of, like, I don't even know, was this even on The Breakfast Club, or was it a different one of their songs that was on there? I think of The Breakfast Club when I hear this, but I don't think that it was. Everybody Wants to Rule the World.
I don't remember if it was or not.
Yeah.
That's not the song, though, I think of with Breakfast Club, for sure.
Yeah. I don't know. But
it's funny. This is another one that made my honorable mentions cut. It was very close. Very
You're
close.
Not going to have an honorable mentions cut by the time we're done.
I still got an honorable.
Oh, goodness. Like the song, though, like is happy and upbeat as it sounds. Like it's actually about like some
Yes,
like
some dark
seriously dark stuff, like during the Cold War and everything, and about
and there's
like,
a lot. Have you heard a lot of the like the covers where they like kind of slowed it down and they've gone a little deeper with the song?
No, I haven't.
No, yeah, there's some good covers out there. I mean, like all this '80s music really lends itself to covers, and there are so many great covers of '80s songs, and this is definitely one of those that I've heard covered, and when covered right, it changes the mood of the song from, like you said, a happy song to more of kind of a somber and dark song because of the lyrics and the way that they are being sung, for sure.
Yeah. I need to go back and listen to some of that then. Yeah. I can totally see that. Cause like I was looking through some of these, like, so Kurt Smith, he's the lead vocalist. He, like I was reading maybe like a Rolling Stone thing or something. He was saying like, so I've got a quote. He said, the concept is quite serious. It's about everybody wanting power, about warfare and the misery it causes. But you don't hear that in the it's just dun, dun. And I think that's what makes it so 80s for me is not the content of the lyrics. It's that synth and the way that the words are sung. I feel like a lot of these 80s songs, when they sing over that synth, it's like their lyrics the vocals just float over that so well. And it really, the combination of like the higher sounding, higher pitched vocalists with that synth sound, it just, I don't know, that sound is like 80s to me. Anytime I hear it, even if I hear a song now that's modern that is using that, I'm like, that's so 80s.
It's so 80s.
Yeah, that's why I've got it at number, what was it? Number 3.
Number 3, yeah.
Yeah, number 3.
Number 3, yeah. That synth sound, yeah. Like I said, that was on my my honorable mention for sure. That's definitely that's an 80s that kicks in those 80s feels for sure.
Yeah,
I would agree. Yeah. So number 3 for me, I'm gonna throw you a curveball there. Like you said you were gonna throw me a curveball. I think I'm about to throw you a curveball.
Okay.
Like a Virgin, Madonna.
Oh,
that right there.
Yes.
Deep 80s. Anytime I hear that, anytime I hear Madonna, really, I think the 80s. Yeah. But that song right there, that is deep 80s. Like it goes back to not only the song being really popular, but again, it influenced fashion, it influenced movies, it influenced so much more than just a song that everybody sang.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you like Michael Jackson, the king of pop. In the 80s, Madonna was the queen of pop.
The queen of pop, yeah.
Everywhere. Every other song on the radio was a Madonna song. She had so many hits. And you're right. And that like a Virgin,
all about like who she dating and who she hanging out with. And she was probably the original I don't know what would be the term for it, but like a Britney Spears or a Taylor Swift to be more modern. Yeah. Yep. Like she was just like the original, like who the pop culture, center point was at the time with Madonna. And I can't really think of one before that other than like maybe like Beatlemania or something to that effect. Maybe,
Elvis,
and even that, I mean, that was probably bigger. It lasted longer. Not to compare apples and oranges there, but pop music and pop culture in the U.S. versus like British invasion. But yeah, we're getting into the weeds there. But yeah, so for me, it was number 3 was Madonna's "Like a Virgin" to throw you off of where I'm coming from.
Okay, well, I think that I'm going to throw you off more with number 4 2 here. More than number 4. Yeah. So so number 2, 1983. Cyndi Lauper, "Girls Just Want to Have Fun."
Oh, I forgot about Cyndi Lauper.
I love this song. I don't even care. I don't even care. I love this song so much. I will listen to it whenever it comes on the radio. I think of nothing but when I think of the 80s, like this song is what comes to mind. When I get to my number one, I'll explain why that's one over this. Yeah. This was originally going to be my number one, but like just the music and the lyrics and like that video where her and her posse, they're out there in the street and they're dancing and she's got that red dress and she's
just flinging
it around. Yeah. And I think of like, I know she did the soundtrack for the Goonies. Really? I don't think this song was on it, but she did do the soundtrack for it. So when I think of this, when I hear the song, I automatically think of the Goonies just because she did work for the Goonies. I think of like The Breakfast Club. I think of, all those John Hughes films, and I don't even know if she was on any of those, but it's just the way that this song sounds, like everything about it it's the most 80s sounding song, I think. I don't know.
Like you need to be able to play the music without having to worry about like copy. Just everybody can go back and when we're done and they can compile, or I'll put in the show notes our lists, and if you want to, you can compile them and listen to them as we talk about them, because you really got to hear these songs.
Oh my gosh,
while we're talking about them.
And this song, like there is a like Harper likes watching, I think it's Trolls. It is Trolls, one of the Trolls movies.
Oh yeah, that's right. They did like a cover of it, right?
Trolls Just Want to Have Fun. Yeah. Yes. So like her and I will sing that sometimes, and then I showed her this song. I was like, did you know this is they actually wrote this based on a song from the 80s? And she's like, oh really? The 80s? Said, yeah. She's like, they had music back then. I said, they did.
In the 1980s.
They did have music back in the 80s. So I pulled it up on YouTube. Yeah, exactly. So I pulled it up on YouTube and I showed it to her, and she really enjoyed the song. And I'm like, see, like even a 7-year-old
just wants to have fun,
can like this song. Yeah. Girls want to have fun. And I have fun listening to Girls Just Want to Have Fun. So that's my number two.
That's all right. That's a solid number two. I gotta say, I always considered, and then it's probably just like masculine and hyper macho influences or something from that time period, or maybe just warped perception from an adolescent brain. But for some reason in my head, I always thought of Cyndi Lauper as not an answer to, but almost a copy of Madonna. Like producers were trying to replicate what happened with Madonna with somebody else, and like a slightly more, I guess, New York vibe with it.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, not to downplay Cyndi Lauper or who she is or anything like that, or her music or her abilities in any way, shape, or form. It's not what I'm saying with this. Just in my brain, as a child, I always kind of thought that she was like the discount version of Madonna.
Oh, wow.
And so I didn't really give it a lot of weight.
Shots fired.
But,
no,
at the time, I know she probably would have given me no never mind. So
yeah, I know what you're saying. I think that, it's, you see it now. I mean, you've got, everybody talks about her, and I'm just, you got Taylor Swift. And record companies see the money that is being brought in by that. And they're like, well, we've got to have our answer to Taylor Swift so that we can capitalize on some of this popularity. And it's been that way all through time.
Doge Cat or Dua Lipa or whatever, you know. Who's our new hit?
Yeah. And sure. like you're saying, that's not saying that Cyndi Lauper, that's not a slight at Cyndi Lauper. Yeah. This song is a great song. She has good music, but I understand exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. And I think it was just kind of probably also kind of born out of like the 80s were almost the incubator, if you will, of what became the music industry is just like churning and burning of pop culture music through, especially in the 90s where we had like the boy band explosion. And I feel like this is kind of like that early part of that where we've got like, you've got your, Madonna and Cyndi Lauper and Debbie Gibson and I forget the other girl's name, but there were all these little like, especially like these like, what do they call it? Like mall pop or something like that.
Yeah, that's a good
go around and they tour at malls and stuff. Yep. Yeah.
Tiffany.
So this is kind of like, yeah. Tiffany, that's it. Yes, thank you. Yeah, so this is just that. I feel like kind of that early. I mean, I'm sure there are people screaming now that this is something that had happened for decades before with like other genres of music that I'm not going to get into, or like even the like it's just them trying to replicate like Beatles over and over again. If you want to take it that far back, or however, but like the 80s, you can't argue there was this bubbling, if you will, up of pop culture music, pop music in like especially these young teen stars that we were talking about that carries out through the 90s with all your boy bands and stuff like that, and then continues into the 2000s. And some could even argue that Taylor Swift is a product of that, and sure, but that's not the argument that we're having here. We're talking our top 5 80s songs, so I'm going to get us back on track.
Okay.
And we're going to go into number 4 now for me, or number 2 now for me. I keep saying number 4 because on my list, I listed them 5 to 1, but whenever I did bullet points like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Google auto corrected me and put them in order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So mine's 1 through 5. Yours is 5 through 1. I'm trying to keep up with you, but we're going to call it. I'm going to keep on your pace, and I'm going to call it my number 2.
Okay.
I have Blondie-Call Me.
Oh, yes. Oh, man. That was like early. That was like 80, wasn't it? I think that's like,
it was early. Yeah. I think it was like, but like that song played through the 80s. And now, like, especially now, like every song or every movie you see now that's made based in the 80s, that song rolls through it.
Yep.
And I feel like it just depicts like this Hollywood glam version of the 80s. And it's just always played to that effect.
Yeah. So like when I was just watching the other day, I like to watch a lot of those limited documentary series or whatever on Netflix. And there was one on how they brought down the New York mob in the 80s. And they were using that song in one of the scenes, and I was like, that totally fits in with the era, and just that like Studio 54 sort of,
like that, the end of disco kind of early synth pop, for sure, that one
I remember that. I mean I remember I was just starting to get into like listening to some 80s music, and my mom actually told me, she's like, have you ever listened to Blondie? I was like, no. And I think she gave me like a cassette tape that she had that was like Blondie's greatest hits or something. So I started listening to that.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But that's my number 2, if you will, Blondie. I mean, whenever somebody says, like, name an 80s song, that's top of mind to me for sure. That goes in my, as far as like something that defines an 80s song or a song from the 80s, that's my number 2.
Yeah.
That's very close to the top for me. And it's a song like I do enjoy that song. If I have an 80s playlist, it's in the top 5 for sure. It's going on my 80s playlist, as well as like 20 other songs that are, partially in my honorable mentions list.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing with this decade, like you could, I mean,
I could feel a top 100 easily.
Oh yeah. We could easily just have a podcast where we talk about this from midnight till like midnight in like 3 weeks from now, and we'd still be on it. There's just so many good songs in this decade. It was so hard to get 5.
Yes.
That's why like we had decided, let's do an honorable mention section so we can throw some of these in there that
because there was
you just want to mention.
Yeah. So then before we get to our number ones, let's discuss our honorable mentions. These are songs that did not make our top 5, but like I said, it can't be a top 5 list without including more than 5.
Right.
What are your honorable mentions that some that you want to bring up?
Okay. They are How Will I Know, Whitney Houston.
Oh, yes.
Gotta have Whitney Houston in one of these. Right Here Waiting by Richard Marx. That came out in 89. And the reason I put that on there, I have like a core key, strong, whatever. We haven't figured out what to call it yet. One of those really good memories of riding around in the car with my mom, and she had a cassette tape of Richard Marx, and we would listen to that almost every time we got in the car. And that Right Here Waiting was like the hit song from that album. So like that's why I've got that. Bon Jovi, 1986, Wanted Dead or Alive. And then going back to your Madonna thing, 1985's Material Girl. I thought needed to be on there. Yeah.
That should have been it. Okay. Yeah.
So those are my honorable mentions. Yeah. I guess maybe I could throw in there Aha's Take on Me.
Hey, don't step on mine now.
Uh-oh. Go right ahead then.
Now, my honorable mentions, I'm going to confess before I start, I cheated. A lot. So my honorable mentions is a little lengthy. Strap in.
That's fine.
I start with synth pop, period. Like that is
just synth pop.
Just pure 80s. Yeah. I feel like that is the sound of the decade. And when I say synth pop, yes, we're talking about Everybody Wants to Rule the World, Tears for Fear, Aha's Take on Me, I Ran, Flock of Seagulls, Hungry Like the Wolf, Duran Duran, Africa, Toto, synth pop.
There is a reason why our intro, like our theme song, has that synth in there.
Yes.
And it's because when you hear that synth, like you're saying, when you hear that synth, it reminds you of the 80s. It reminds you of retro. And anyway, that's the point I was going to make on that. So.
All right. And I've also got to mention there's only one song that I'm going to call out specifically in my honorable mentions, and it's Phil Collins, In the Air Tonight.
Oh,
and specifically for that unique drum beat that they invented for that song and came out of that song and was used so much after that. That came from that da-dun, 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 da-dun.
Oh,
that's from that song that was created in the recording studio specifically for that song. And I can't remember exactly. I think it was like the first time that they used electronic drums is what it is.
Okay.
That's the first song that utilized those electronic drums that just like exploded onto the scene shortly after that.
Oh, okay.
Because of that song.
Interesting.
But I feel like that one needs a special call out just for that.
So side note, real quick, I don't want to chase a rabbit, but since we're on the Phil Collins topic, and since you're in Texas, at the Alamo in San Antonio, like a lot of the artifacts they have there are on loan from Phil Collins because he is a huge fan of the story of the Alamo, and he bought all these relics up and he loans them out to the museum.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fun fact.
Yeah. It's
Fun fact from Ryan.
Yep. Yeah.
And then with absolutely no transition, I got hip hop. 80s hip hop, Run DMC's Tricky, NWA, Straight Outta Compton, Public Enemy, Fight the Power, Grandmaster Flash, White Lines, like that is heavily 80s in me, and it breaks my heart that I couldn't put one of those into my top 5, but they definitely belong in the honorable mentions category.
I wanted to put in what was the name of that song now? No, I can't remember. It's one of the Sugar Hill Gang songs, but I looked it up and I think it came out in 79, and I'm like, okay, I can't throw it in there. But you're right.
I felt the same way about like Journey, which actually came out in the 80s. But for me, it reminds me of the 70s. Like it feels more like 70s rock than it does 80s rock to me. So I just didn't include it.
Yep.
But Journey would have been in the same line for me. I mean, really, it's like it's about what does it remind you of, not necessarily where did it come from. And I'll circle back to that
true.
At the end of my honorable mentions.
Okay.
Next up, I've got hair metal. Deserves its own honorable mention because, again, that's a sound that just like that's pure 80s. You got your Twisted Sister, I Want to Rock, Def Leppard, Pour Some Sugar on Me. You talked about Motley Crue. We got Guns N' Roses, Welcome to the Jungle, Warrant, Cherry Pie, Poison, Every Rose Has Its Thorn. I mean, hair metal had its moment.
Oh, man.
And it was the 80s. And then the 90s answered with grunge, but...
Oh, yeah. What was that joke I made? It was, talk dirty to me while I wear my sister's makeup.
Yeah. Yes. It was a unique time for sure. And David Lee Roth was definitely, Grand Marshal of that parade.
Oh, yeah.
And then I've got heavy metal. You got your, Metallica, Master of Puppets. It just really, Metallica dominated, I feel like, that era of heavy metal. But Metallica's Master of Puppets, Motorhead, Ace of Spades, AC/DC, Highway to Hell, Megadeth, Hangar 18, Iron Maiden, Run to the Hills. I mean, again, you could list we could do an entire podcast on just that genre alone, I'm sure.
I love metal so much.
Yes. and really, like, I'm going through this list of heavy metal songs, and I was compiling my little, because whenever I approached this, I approached it as, okay, I can come up with the top 5, but they're all probably going to be within the same vein or the same genre because I'm going to be thinking in that genre mindset. So then I stepped back and I looked at it and I said, okay, what were the most popular genres of music in the 80s that I remember? And then what were the songs within those genres? And then I pulled from that. And whenever I was looking at the heavy metal ones, I really it reminded me of Guitar Hero. And do you remember like Guitar Hero, like 2 and 3, especially like it was so much just like 80s metal. And I remember playing like Hangar 18 and like Motorhead and Iron Maiden's Run to the Hill off of that little plastic guitar.
I remember you were over at my apartment one time, and I don't know. We were up there for whatever reason. I think you were visiting. I think it was right after you and your wife got married. Yeah. And I don't know. I remember playing, like we were up there and I was playing something. I think, it was Sweet Child of Mine, I think on Expert. Oh, yeah. And we went back downstairs because Aunt Kathy lived in, the apartment like downstairs or whatever. And you were like telling Allison about it. And you're like, he's up there beating things or 5-starring things on Expert. I've never felt more proud in my life than that moment. I was like, oh man, my brother thinks I'm cool because I can 5-star a song in Guitar Hero on Expert.
Meanwhile, we're back at home on the weekends playing, with each other on the Xbox, and we're playing on like, what was it, like easy? What was the second level? We're trying to master just hitting four of the different keys, and you're hitting like 6 of them.
I remember that. And then like several years later, after I don't know, Harper was like a year old or something. Anyway, we went on like a little mini vacation. We were at an arcade, and I was with Landon, and I'm like, oh, hey, they've got an arcade cabinet for Guitar Hero. I'm like, let me show you how it's done. So we get over there and we pop our tokens in, and we're playing. He goes on easy, and I'm like, I'm going to do Expert. And I think it was Freebird that we did. And I'm like, I'm going to do Expert. Yeah. So we start playing it, and it had been years since I'd played. And I'm like, oh, this is a mistake. I couldn't remember what I was doing, and I'm trying to go up on these notes. I failed miserably. He beat me by so much. Oh, man. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. They had like so many 80s metal songs on that I was introduced to because of that game.
And then they had the entire one that was all like, they had one whole one for Beatles. They had one whole one for Aerosmith. They had a whole one for Who was the other band that they did a whole one? They did a whole band. I think didn't they have a Metallica one? Or was that rock band? Maybe. I don't remember.
I don't remember. There was a whole phase of those.
Yeah, and which I mean, well, okay, that's why. Yeah, I was about to say we haven't mentioned Aerosmith at all in all of this, but really, I remember looking at it because I had the same thought last week whenever I was going through that. I feel like I'm repeating my thought process as we're recording this podcast as I did over the course of the last week thinking of the podcast. But I had the thought of, oh yeah, Aerosmith, they were around in the 80s. They, started in the 70s. They had to have had some great hits in the 80s. And I go back and I start looking at it. I'm like, oh, really? Most of Aerosmith actually reminds me of the 90s. It reminds me of either classic rock or 90s rock. I don't think of them and I don't think of 80s. And they really weren't around too much in the 80s. They did have that one with, it wasn't public in the Run DMC. Yeah. They had the Run DMC song.
That's what brought them back, because they they went on a hiatus because Joe Perry and Steven Tyler hated each other. And, and I think they went on a hiatus, and then they got back and they recorded that Walk This Way with Run DMC, and that kind of is what brought them back together, if I remember right. I thought I remembered seeing that from something. But
yeah, because I think it was early 90s, like 90, maybe 91, maybe 89. I can't remember now. They had that, was it Pump or something like that came out that was that led to their 90s renaissance, all the way, because they had so many albums that came out in the 90s. But anyways, on a tangent, I'm going to wrap up my honorable mentions with just two more. Weird Al. Because I think of Weird Al, I think of the 80s, because he covered so many, great songs like Bad and Beat It, with his Eat It and Fat. And that's just my childhood is watching those videos on repeat and laughing and singing along and knowing all the wrong songs wrong lyrics to the right songs.
Well, his album. So there was Bad.
Yeah,
Michael Jackson's Bad, and then his album was called Even Worse.
Yeah,
for that, that's right. It's so funny.
Just great. That steeps into that informs the comedy that I like for sure is listening to those Weird Owls. More specifically, watching the videos on MTV and VH1 growing up. Yeah, because that's where we consumed a lot of music. In our youth was through the television of all places, and I remember hitting specifically the jukebox at Pizza Hut, going in and being given $2 and throw a couple coins in the jukebox and play a couple songs and then play a couple rounds of Galaga or whatever arcade they had at the time, and waiting for our pizza to be done. Or I think back then we were still hitting the buffet. Yeah, they still had the buffet, so we'd hit the buffet.
Buffets. Yep.
Yeah, the buffet, the Pizza Hut buffet, man.
I miss it.
Yeah, I miss it so much. We came across one a few years back on a road trip, and we couldn't decide what to do for dinner. And I was like, let's go take them into this Pizza Hut. They got the buffet. We can relive those, we can check it out and do the Pizza Hut buffet thing again. And first off, their buffet was shut down, so we had to order individual personal pan pizzas, and it was not good. It was just a horrible experience all around. The place had not been updated since the 80s, so it was not a fantastic experience.
Too bad.
But coming back to the final thing I want to touch on for my honorable mentions. Have you listened to Weezer's Teal album?
No. Was that in the 80s?
No, it came out 2018, 2019, some last couple of years it came out.
Yes. I know what you're talking about now.
Africa, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, Sweet Dreams, Take on Me, Paranoid, No Scrubs. Fantastic album to wrap up that decade of music.
I haven't listened to it. I've listened to Africa and you say Roxanne that they did a cover of. Was that right?
It wasn't on this one, but they may have done it.
No. Okay. Anyway,
it wasn't on this album.
But I remember I've listened to a couple individual songs from that album, but I've not listened to the thing in its entirety. I need to do that.
I highly encourage you, just find it on Spotify or wherever you listen to music, and just listen to it from front to back. It's great. And and speaking of musical videos, their music video for their music video for Africa, I want to say Weird Al makes an appearance in, which is great. Like to wrap up the 80s thing. And then whenever they did, I think it was Take On Me, the music video for that one, they had, or no, maybe it was Everybody Wants, I don't know, one of the two. They had Finn Wolfhard from Stranger Things playing the younger version of Weezer's frontman. What's his name? I'm blanking on his name now.
Yeah, I am too right now.
I'm not going to look it up. It's everything in me not to go back and look it up. Yeah. So anyways, so they had Finn Wolfhard. You know, they were all played like, they had like younger kids playing them, and the scene was them playing in their basement in the 80s as kids, and Finn Wolfhard was, you know, because Stranger Things is really popular at the time. He was playing the younger, it was right there. It was right there. The name.
Look at
Rivers.
Yes.
Como Rivers. Oh, that was like, it was just gnawing at my brain as I was talking, and I finally got it out. All right. Okay, so
somebody is screaming that right now. You were trying to figure out what it is. They're like screaming at the top of their lungs. They're driving down the road screaming. This is what it is.
Well, they were able to whomever was screaming Como Rivers at me. It worked. It went back through time because you were going 88 miles an hour. And the waves made their way to my brain, and I got the song thanks to you, or I got the name of the artist thanks to you.
The power of internet radio.
To that person, I want to say thank you. And we're going to go to our number ones now.
Number ones.
What do you got?
One more quick real thing before we go on to number ones. While we're on the topic of the Teal album, if you like modern takes on 80s music,
yes,
John Mayer's Sob Rock album. It's all original stuff that he did. It's not covers, but it's got that 80s feel to it. So
all right, I'll check it out.
You have to check that out. So anyway, okay. Number one song that makes me think of the 80s is from 1985, and it's not just one artist.
Uh-oh.
It's various artists. Can you guess what this song is?
This is the Heal the World, or We Are the World?
We Are the World. Yes. The world. No other song is as 80s as this song. I mean, look at this. So I'm going to run down some of the artists that sing in this song. It's going to be a decent sized list, so bear with me here. Michael Jackson, Lionel Richie, Stevie Wonder, Paul Simon, Kenny Rogers, Tina Turner, Billy Joel, Diana Ross, Willie Nelson, Bruce Springsteen, Kenny Loggins, Steve Perry, Daryl Hall, Huey Lewis, Cyndi Lauper, my girl Cyndi, Bob Dylan, Ray Charles, Stevie Nicks, Lindsey Buckingham of Fleetwood Mac, and Donna Summer are just some of the stars that were on this song. All produced by Quincy Jones. And it's a bad song, but it is like it is this 80s song. That's why I'm like, I didn't put Cyndi Lauper's "Girls Just Want to Have Fun" as number one, because I feel like, although that's probably. I do. Yeah. Although I feel like that is probably my personal favorite 80s song, this song is, if you're looking back at the 80s with, like, you know, you're stepping back. Yes. This song is like, if someone's like, define the 80s with one song, for me, it has to be We Are the World. I mean, what else is more 80s than like, there's a famine in Africa, we need to fight it, so how are we going to do it? Let's write a song, and we'll get a lot of these people to
famous artists
come sing, and then we're going to give the proceeds to save the world. And as valiant and noble as that cause is, I'm not saying it's not, because, you know, people are starving, and that's no good. And they're trying something. But that song sucked. It was so bad. It was so bad. But it was big. People thought it was incredible because they got all these artists together.
Yeah.
I'm like,
I don't know. I can't remember every year at the Super Bowl.
Yeah, well, yeah. I can't remember who it was. There's somebody. It's escaping me now. If you watch, like, there's the video of them doing it. There's one of the artists that, like, you could tell just does not want to be there. And
I think it was Springsteen, wasn't it? He was the one that was just like,
maybe it was. Yes,
yeah, he was like, I don't want to do this or whatever.
Yeah,
I haven't watched it yet, but is this because of that documentary they did on Netflix?
I haven't watched it. I saw it after I put this, because the internet knows exactly what you're thinking, and I saw it after I put this list together. And I was like, oh, they've got a documentary out for this, so I'll have to watch it, because I've been on a documentary kick lately, so I'll have to watch that. But
I always love a good documentary.
Yeah.
I've seen that one, and I'm like, I'm going to go back and watch that one. In fact, there's that one for Thriller that I want to go back and watch as well. But I think I'm going to hold off, and I'm going to watch that closer to whenever we decide to do our Thriller episode.
Oh, yes. Yep.
But yeah, for sure. So Cyndi Lauper would have been your number one.
Would have been my number one if
your personal number one as well.
Personal number one, yes.
See, my personal number one didn't even make it on my top 5.
Oh no! Uh-oh.
My personal number one is "Take on Me" with Aha.
Oh yeah,
that's my personal number one.
Yeah, I love that song too. I love that song. It's so good.
It's so good. It's so fantastic.
Oh,
but my number one song that reminds me of the 80s, I went with Simple Minds' "Don't You Forget About Me."
Because
it was in every John Hughes movie. Like, it steeps 80s to me. That is the quintessential 80s song to me.
How did I not think about that song? I don't know how I didn't think about that.
Which ties for my number one. Like that's my close number 2, right behind Aha, for sure.
I mean, there's that. I mean, the classic scene at the end of The Breakfast Club when he throws the fist up in the air, and that's. You're right. That is solid 80s right there. Oh man, gosh.
Yeah, you got you got some rock, you got some synth. It's just like, and then it just, I don't even. I mean, yeah, because even the lyrics, like, don't you forget about me. Don't forget about the 80s. We can't, because we just keep coming back to them with these nostalgic trips that we keep taking. Yeah. For sure.
What a decade, man.
What a decade. Oh, what a great decade of music. And that's why we got to come back sometime down the line and do our personal top 5 or 10, if you want to include the honorable mentions, songs from the 80s.
We need to, because there's a lot of stuff on here I still didn't mention. And
and then that'll be more specific to songs that came out in the 80s, not just necessarily songs that remind us of the 80s. Yeah. Because there's songs like you're saying with like Journey and stuff that came out in the 80s that I don't really think of. This isn't an 80s sounding song. It feels like classic rock.
Yeah. And that's okay, but like when we talk about what reminds us of the 80s,
feel like classic rock too.
Yeah. You're just, when you want something that reminds you of the 80s, you're looking for a specific feel
for
of a song.
For sure. So of all of that we've talked about, well, I don't know. Would you say, who would you say is the best artist from the 80s?
Well, I'm going to have to say it's Michael Jackson.
Okay. You stole my answer.
Well, I mean, then there's a reason, like we both think that, because there's no other option. Is there really?
No.
I mean,
for sure. Nobody worked harder. Nobody cranked out more. I mean, for sure. Like, he just dominated the 80s.
Yep. I mean, I guarantee you, most people, if you would come up to them on the street, and say, quick, when you think of the 80s, what musician do you think of? It'd be Michael Jackson.
Yeah. I would say easily 70% of them for sure.
Yep.
Solid.
Yeah. There's no other choice in my mind. He solidified himself as the king of pop. And that was the decade. And that's that.
That's it. That wraps up the decade.
Yeah.
So one more question. When making this list, what were maybe some songs or artists that you were reminded of that you've perhaps forgotten about or didn't consider?
Well, so I didn't consider Blondie. When you had said Blondie, that wasn't something that I had necessarily initially thought about. Not the hair metal, the heavy metal. I had, so I'd thought about Metallica. Honestly, I'd thought about putting Master of Puppets on there. The reason I'd thought about that, because I really thought about it, and I was like, I'm really wanting to put this on here because of Stranger Things. Yeah. And that excellent, unquestionably in my mind, the best scene from any television series ever is when Eddie's playing that in Stranger Things.
Would it have been better if he would have played Ride the Lightning? Because he was summoning lightning? Or is that too on the nose?
I don't know.
It's too on the nose,
I think
isn't
it's too on the nose. God. I remember watching that whole scene play out.
Yeah.
And it finished. And I paused because when new Stranger Things seasons come out, Landon and Mindy and I sit down and we watch those together and we will binge watch them together. And I remember we were watching that scene and it finished. I picked up the remote. I paused the TV. I look over at them both and I say, that's the best television I've ever seen in my entire life right there. And I was not joking. I was not trying to make a show of it. I am serious and I will defend it right here. That's the best piece of television ever made. And I thought about putting that. Oh my gosh. It's so good. It's so good. And so I thought about putting that on the list, but I didn't because I'm putting it on there because of Stranger Things. Yes, Stranger Things is 80s, but it's not 80. It's about the 80s, but it's technically not. So, but I didn't really think of 80s metal and Megadeth and Iron Maiden and stuff like that.
I didn't either. And for me, it's because I didn't get introduced to 80s metal until high school. Late 90s is whenever I really got introduced to 80s metal and started listening to it. And so for me, it kind of feels like 90s music to me, even though it's not. It just 80s metal music doesn't feel like 80s to me. It feels like 90s because that's whenever I discovered it. And that's whenever it reached me, if you will. So that's one that as I was looking back on, I was like, oh yeah, 80s metal that came out in the 80s, the Metallica and Megadeth and Motorhead and all that. Yeah. AC/DC. Yeah, for sure.
Well, and that stuff really is closer to in style is closer to stuff Pantera or what I guess Slayer was in the 80s some too, but it's closer to that style of music than when I think of 80s metal, just off the top of my head, I think of Poison. I think of GNR. I think of hair metal because that's what was so big. It was mainstream. And then
the true metal just went underground until the 90s.
Yeah. As much as I love that stuff, I love Megadeth. I love whatever. It wasn't mainstream, and like the hair metal was. So
hence Eddie from Stranger Things, who was kind of the outsider, listening to heavy metal.
Yep.
Yeah. And speaking of Stranger Things, had you heard of Kate Bush before Stranger Things?
No, not at all. Not at all.
I'm convinced she was invented for the show.
I know. I know. But that's a good song, right? When I discovered it from listening to it from Stranger Things, I'm like, wow, that's a good song.
It was good. It was good the first time I heard it. I don't know that it's necessarily as good as has been blown up to be, but it's definitely a solid 80s song. But I feel like I heard it so much in the 2 weeks after that episode dropped on like every social media platform, especially like you get that same like 10-15 second cut of it over and over and over, and it just hammers away at you, and eventually you're like, okay, stop, I'm good, I don't need to hear the song again. And I feel like it's something that they'll come back around.
Yeah, you know, and I think she made more money off that, like the money that she got after that came out from streaming than she had when it first released.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, yeah. Absolutely. So I'm sure she's laughing all the way to the bank. She's like, I don't care.
Yeah. And they inducted her in she's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame now because of it.
Oh, like, is she seriously?
Yeah, like I think it was either this last year or the year before she got put in the Hall of Fame.
Good for her, man. Good for her. That's awesome. That's good. Yeah.
I think we may be winding down now.
Yeah. I had a lot of fun talking with you about this.
Yeah, this is a good. That's what I'm saying. I feel like 80s music is going to come up a couple more times.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, it's a hit. It's a hit through and through. So next week, if you're following along with us.
We got yours.
Oh, yeah. We're going to be doing The Burbs. I know some of you out there have seen this. It's kind of a cult classic now. Came out in 1989. Wasn't a big hit when it released. And Tom Hanks, Carrie Fisher.
Yeah.
I mean, what a babe,
it's
right?
You mentioned this is what you want to do for number 5. And I've heard in 3 separate conversations now this movie come up. A movie
Have you really?
I've never really, I mean, I've known it existed. It's been on kind of like, you know, the back burner as far as like movies that I want to eventually watch. But I've never really seen it before. So I'm going to get to go through and see it. And I want to preface this. I've probably seen parts of it on cable and just forgotten about it. But
I guarantee you.
I've never sat down and like watched it. So I'm going to sit down this week and I'm going to watch it and we'll talk about it next time.
Yeah. It's one of my personal favorites. So
it's Tom Hanks.
For me, it'll be business as usual. For you, it's going to be, you know,
something I missed.
Something you missed. So that's what we're going to do. You want to follow along with us? Watch The Burbs. With that, we've reached another checkpoint, and don't forget to be kind and rewind. Until next time, see y'all later.
There is a companion Spotify playlist found in the show notes of this episode. This Podcast Takes Tokens is a Clay Street production.